I will now have the pleasure to give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Mahinda Samarasinghe, Minister of Plantation Industries and Special Envoy of the President on Human Rights, to present the additional information on the review. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. My delegation and I join you this morning with a deep sense of satisfaction. November 2012 saw Sri Lanka face its second UPR, and we were able to lay before the working group our progress since 2008 and the expectations for future improvements in the promotion and protection of human rights. Going forward, we have come a long way since the initial Universal Periodic Review of Sri Lanka during the first cycle in 2008. My country then was engaged in a conflict against terrorism, commencing in 2006, trying to rescue a civilian population held by a ruthless group of terrorists. A year after that first review, we finally achieved success in the humanitarian operation and witnessed the dawn of a new era of peace, stability, and prosperity for all Sri Lankans. Since May 2009, we engaged in a period of consolidation, removing military involvement in civil administration, reconstruction, demining, rehabilitation, resettlement, and launched our initial efforts at national reconciliation and peace building. Mr. President, the UPR has been an event in which we have been able to periodically pause, take stock, reflect and share with our friends in the Human Rights Council our achievements, challenges and determination to move forward. The interest and level of participation in the UPR of Sri Lanka is also sincerely appreciated. We noted that a clear majority of the countries that engaged in the UPR last November acknowledged our progress. Some of the countries that did so also pointed out the challenges that we faced. We were able to take up some of the constructive recommendations made, and we also made voluntary commitments. To sum up, Mr. President, Sri Lanka received a total of 204 recommendations during the second cycle of the UPR held last November. At the adoption of the report in the working group, Sri Lanka accepted 110 recommendations, and following further examination, Sri Lanka decided to support a further 3 recommendations, bringing the total number of recommendations enjoying our support to 130. Another 91 recommendations do not enjoy the support of Sri Lanka. Our position on the recommendations we were able to support are clearly set out in the addendum to the report of the working group. The addendum further clarifies and elaborates Sri Lanka's stance on some of the recommendations emanating from the review. These recommendations have been duly noted, and Sri Lanka will endeavour to address these issues through relevant national policies and programs. In addition, Sri Lanka has also made 19 voluntary commitments. Mr. President, in this context, I must point out that Sri Lanka has accepted the 12 recommendations specifically referring to the National Action Plan for the implementation of the recommendations of the Lessons Learned and Reconciliation Commission, which is our mechanism to implement the recommendations of the LLRC. It is perhaps unfortunate that we were unable to agree to more refinements and modifications in the text of some recommendations in order to achieve a consensus that could have led to the acceptance of more recommendations. It is our belief, Mr. President, that the level of flexibility that characterized our experience in 2008, the first cycle, is preferable to the rigid textual formality that appears to govern the UPR at present. The UPR is an intergovernmental process that is based on cooperation and constructive engagement. I would also briefly allude to some of the positive developments since November. Much of the salutary achievements are also referred to in our national statement, to the high-level segment of the 22nd session at the end of February. As I stated on that occasion, the government of Sri Lanka has also made requisite financial provision by budgetary allocation for 2013 for the implementation of the National Action Plan on the implementation of the recommendations of the LLRC. Over rupees 1.2 billion has been committed to funding the various activities. Our progress in the process of implementation is openly shared with anyone interested by way of publication on the web. This is the level of commitment we have shown. We have consolidated our gains in resettlement. Our achievement is perhaps unparalleled given the short period in which progress was accomplished, just 3.5 years since the end of the conflict. In the overall process of accountability, which was the subject of some interventions during the working group session, the first issue that must be addressed is that of the arbitrary figures of the so-called civilian victims. These figures have been repeated by several sources without once verifying the facts. This is why our national census of 2012 and the enumeration in the north preceding it in 2011 were of such importance. Ground verification of facts is continuing as we speak, and results of these processes will be identified. We believe we will be able to gain an accurate picture of the several causes of civilian deaths. A cabinet memorandum titled Assistance and Protection of Victims of Crime and Witnesses Bill was submitted by the Ministry of Justice and was taken up for policy approval at the meeting of the Cabinet of Ministers held on the 7th of February 2013. It was decided to obtain the views of the Attorney General on this matter to aid in the deliberations of the Cabinet. Subsequent to the recommendations of the LLRC, the Attorney General reviewed the cases relating to the 5 students from Trincomalee. I'm still on accountability. 5 students from Trincomalee and the ACF workers. Having concluded the work on the 5 students from Trincomalee, the Attorney General has directed the police to commence non-summary judicial proceedings. The review with regard to the ACF case is also ongoing. Needless to say, Mr. President, we will of course keep our friends in the international community updated on the progress. Also on the question of accountability, inquiries are entrained by the military authorities as to questions of civilian casualties during the humanitarian operation, including the Channel 4 video footage, irrespective of its authenticity. Further to the recommendations of the LLRC, the database on detainees is available to the next of kin, who are able to obtain details in response to their inquiries. The investigations into those allegedly disappeared are ongoing through national mechanisms. As we have regularly informed this Council, the National Plan of Action for the Promotion and Protection of Human Rights was a commitment that grew out of our initial review in 2008. That was a principal pledge we made and one that we spent considerable time and effort in realizing. December 2012 marked the first year of implementation of the Human Rights Action Plan. We are currently engaged in an evaluation of the first year and will shortly publish our progress. The National Human Rights Action Plan was conceived of as an overarching measure to consolidate our gains and to systematically address the various issues and challenges in the field of human rights. Mr. President, we will now have to conceive of a national mechanism that will take into consideration the recommendations supported and pledges made consequent to the adoption of the report before the Council on this occasion. We are confident that we can incorporate the outcome document into our national plans and programs of action so that by 2017, when we face a review, that we will be able to demonstrate further advances in the promotion and protection of human rights for the benefit of Sri Lankan people. I reiterate what I said earlier, that Sri Lanka is deeply appreciative of member and observer states for their interest and positive engagement during the UPR process, as well as the acknowledgement of our efforts in the promotion and protection of human rights. As with the UPR, Sri Lanka will continue its transparent, proactive and constructive engagement with the Human Rights Council and keep member and observer states informed of further developments in Sri Lanka in the field of promotion and protection of human rights. In conclusion, Mr. President, I look forward to the engagement during the ensuing hour and expect a positive outcome that will accrue to the benefit of the multi-ethnic, multilingual, multi-religious and multicultural people of Sri Lanka. I thank you for your attention.
Now to Minister Samarasinga, who asked for the floor now.
Well, Mr. President, with your permission, I'd like to give the floor to my colleague, the Additional Solicitor General of the Attorney General's Department of Sri Lanka, to respond to an observation made by the UK delegation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. President, on the issue of impeachment of the Chief Justice, we wish to state that the constitutional and procedural metrics involved in the impeachment of the judges of the Superior Court of Sri Lanka is not some process invented on a person-centric ad hoc manner, but rather a time-tested old process in existence for well over almost 30 years. In that context, it is therefore correct to state that the invocation of this procedure to meet the requirements that had emerged consequent to the facts relating to the instant case is understandably justifiable. However, presently this entire process and a ruling by a division of the Supreme Court relating to this matter have now been brought under the judicial review by a full bench of the Supreme Court. It is our hope that in near future we will be enriched with the jurisprudential findings of this bench, which in fact is tasked with the need to review the impeachment process in a holistic, contemporary context. Thank you.
I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Mahinda Samarasinga for his concluding remarks. Minister, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. May I, at the outset, thank everyone who participated in the working group, especially for the constructive engagement that was shown on the UPR of Sri Lanka. I can remember sitting here and listening to many interventions, and I must say for the record that a clear majority of those interventions did appreciate and acknowledge the tremendous progress that has been made by the government of Sri Lanka in moving towards comprehensive reconciliation. One must not forget that this is a 30-year conflict, almost 30-year conflict, facing one of the worst forms of terrorism that the world had ever seen, that was brought to an end. Many thousands of people suffered over the years. I listened to some of the interventions by the non-governmental organizations who took the floor, but I didn't hear anyone talking about the extreme atrocities that were committed by the Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam. I would like to share some of these instances with all those who are listening today on the UPR of Sri Lanka. During this period of 30 years, many civilians were brutally murdered and assassinated by the Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam. Suicide bombers, bombs in buses, killed men, women, children in their thousands. When 186 Muslim citizens of Sri Lanka were praying in a mosque in Katankudi, they were indiscriminately killed by the LTT who came into the mosque didn't identify who the people in the mosque were. They just shot at them and they killed them in cold blood. There were thousands of Muslims who were banished forcibly from Jaffna, from Mana, from a place called Muttur. I myself, when I was the Minister for Disaster Management during that time, I can remember going to some of these IDP camps and seeing thousands and thousands of Muslims, for no fault of their own, who were banished forcibly from their homes by the LTT. Buddhist places of worship were targeted. The holiest shrine for the Buddhists, called the Temple of the Tooth, which is a historical place of worship for all Buddhists all over the world, was targeted with the intention of creating a backlash amongst the Sinhalese against the Tamils. Fortunately, the Sinhalese did not react, because we had learned a lesson from 1983 when there was a backlash, and it was never, fortunately, repeated again. Now, all these instances, I can tell you hundreds and hundreds of such instances where men, women, children, I can show you photographs of little babies who were mutilated as a result of the LTT's indiscriminate attention to wipe out anyone who was blocking their autocratic, brutal way of destabilizing the country and resorting to extreme forms of terrorism during this period. Now, anyone who talks about instances of killings, instances of these kinds of very important instances should also be balanced. Why didn't anyone talk about the atrocities of the LTT? This is why we resolved that we wanted to wipe out the LTT and give the freedom that is now given to all people of Sri Lanka. We are a multicultural society, we are a multi-religious society, we are a multi-ethnic society. Religious belief is guaranteed by the Constitution of Sri Lanka. There may be instances where religious places of worship have been attacked in the past during these 30 years, but after the end of the conflict, these instances have been significantly diminished. And our government does not condone any such instance of attack of religious places of worship, because we have given guarantees under the Constitution for religious freedom to our people, and we will continue to protect and nurture that freedom that we have given. So please be balanced. You can certainly bring to our attention outstanding cases, and as I mentioned in my initial speech, the 5 Trincomalee students, the case has now commenced, and there is a non-summary trial. That is the judicial inquiry that is proceeding as we speak. We need the time and space to look at these instances. We have not set it aside. We have not absolved ourselves from the responsibility that is ours. We want to ensure sustainable peace in Sri Lanka, and as much as these instances will be looked at and those who are responsible for these gruesome events are dealt with within the framework of the law, we will ensure that those instances which took place during the last 30 years would also be looked into, and comprehensive reconciliation achieved in our journey towards ensuring sustainable peace. We have never come here to this council and said that everything is fine in Sri Lanka. We have put on record the progress that has been made. We have also acknowledged very clearly that there are challenges ahead of us. We are only asking for time and space to overcome these challenges. Within 3.5 years, considerable progress has been made, And we have put that on record. No one can challenge that. Of course, there are other challenges which needs to be overcome, and we have resolved that we will ensure that these challenges are also overcome. We have never absolved ourselves from the responsibility of placing before the international community all the progress that has been done in relation to moving towards comprehensive reconciliation, and we will continue to do that. We want to engage with you, but what we ask you is to be balanced, to be objective, to be impartial. As much as there is progress that needs to be acknowledged, it is important that time and space is given for further progress to be achieved. So having said that, Mr. President, I thank you very much for giving me the time to put everything in the correct perspective and assure everyone in this council that we will continue to engage with our friends in the international community, and we will continue to work towards further progress in Sri Lanka, moving towards comprehensive reconciliation. Thank you very much.
I thank you, Excellency, for your presentation and concluding remarks, and for participation of Sri Lanka in whole UPR process. Ladies and gentlemen, may I now propose that the Council adopts the decision on the outcome of the Universal Periodic Review of Sri Lanka as it appears on the screen. I see no objection. The decision is adopted.